Hello, Biotechnicans. For today, we would be looking into yet another interesting video on how to actually meet the deadlines while you're doing your PhD. So this was a question which was being asked from many of our students who are doing their PhD interns. So what we thought is, let us try to create this content so that this would be of a greater use for you. Let's try to look into it. Welcome back. So for today, as we have discussed, we'll look into how do I write an effective PhD thesis, and also very importantly, certain tips and tactics to actually meet the deadline. So remember, during the PhD, being productive and also managing the time becomes very, very crucial. So normally what happens is, when a PhD student or when a master student enters a PhD, an ideal picture is, you have your master's degree with you, and then you just walk into your supervisor, you find a beautiful work title, and then you think that you will just go into a laboratory, do certain analytical experiments, and with that analytical experiments, you would try to put up the data onto your computer, compile the data, publish the data, and then you very beautifully present your thesis to your supervisor. Okay, this is what we call it as the origin of the thesis. But on the other way, trust me, my dear friends, this is fictitious. Okay, this is a pseudo image which has been created. Actually, when you finish your master's and when you're planning for your PhD, this is the scenario wherein you don't know how exactly you need to manage time. You are, you get frustrated writing emails to the supervisor, and very importantly, you are into a condition wherein you just want to break everything, because the level of frustration which has been developed for finding a proper title for your PhD topic, and finding a right institute or a university, India or abroad, and also designing your entire proposal for funding becomes very, very crucial. So this is an actual scenario for a PhD student. But trust me, with all this narration, I am not trying to scare you. The thing is, if you are able to write it in a much proper way, and if you are able to design it with a proper guidance, I think it is also a cakewalk. So normally in a particular lab, when you just enter, there is always a supervisor's ego. There's always the senior lab mates' egos. There are always the contemporaries' egos. Okay, and remember, all these egos will just try to bring in competition between the co-workers and not collaboration. So for coming out with an effective work, okay, which can actually help in societal contribution and with a scientific significance, you need to collaborate with everybody. And remember, having effective communication with your supervisor, with your seniors, and with your lab mates, especially your contemporaries, becomes very, 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 very important, because only all these scenarios put together will create an holistic environment for doing up good research. So many a times the supervisor thinks that the supervisor's experience becomes much more important, and for a PhD student, whatever he or she wants to propose, it is normally not considered. However, the supervisor always tries to ride on the ideas of the PhD students, wherein many a times this can also hamper or enhance the creativity or innovation of the student, or sometimes even the supervisor. So hence, please do not take all these mentorship from your supervisors or from your seniors as insults, and do not take it very personally. Just think that this is a growing phase, this is a nurturing phase, and the actual work requires certain amount of training. So the first 6 months of the training, especially in your PhD, should be like a blank paper, that anything and everything which could be written could be clearly read. So either the writer would be your supervisor or your seniors or even your lab mates. So it is always a learning phase. So just make sure you learn anything and everything from that particular lab, because understanding the laboratory niche or the habit and habitat of a particular laboratory becomes very, very important. And trust me, my dear friends, every laboratory has its own different culture. And understanding this culture makes the things much more easier for the next few years for you in that particular laboratory. So what exactly happens during the course? So during the course, it is always the nurturing of the ideas, nurturing of innovation, nurturing of the techniques, whatever you have learned from your books until your masters, and that has to be applied onto proving a particular hypothesis. And hence the communication between the guide, that is the supervisor or the mentor, and the PhD students becomes very, very crucial for the success of a PhD thesis. So with the right guidance, I am very, very sure that you are able to put up your ideas which was executed in terms of your work. Either it could be a wet lab work or a dry lab work. And once this was being compiled into certain data and results, then effectively writing becomes much more crucial. So with my experience of writing my own PhD thesis and also guiding my students for their PhD, what I have learned is it becomes very, very crucial that you actually exchange ideas, so that ultimately the society and the scientific fraternity has to appreciate your thesis so that they should get benefited out of it. So the entire intention when we write PhD thesis is, how do I think in a much better than a layman? So, the final contribution should go to the society rather than just making one mere publication. So, having a proper communication becomes very, very important. Now, let us try to see the various stages of research wherein you can either design your research projects or, you can put up the entire concept into your thesis. So, the first thing when you enter into a lab is, have a beautiful idea. So the problem statement has to be very well defined, because in this condition, it is like, you are going into an hotel, and in this hotel you have a buffet which has been arranged, and you cannot have a liberty of putting your hands into all the dishes. So you need to be well determined to select your favorite topic, your favorite dish, so that this would be, the dish for your lifetime. Okay, so you need to always relish that particular dish any point in your lifetime. So creating that curiosity, creating and identifying that right definition, very importantly, the problem statement becomes very, very critical. Once you know the problem statement, be very clear about your research question. And once you know about your research question, so define your objectives and hypothesis. Again, very, very important. It has to be well defined. And according to me, in an Indian scenario, I would not extend objectives more than 3, because the normal tenure in an Indian scenario would be somewhere between 3 to 5 years. So I would always recommend for designing 3 objectives in a PhD thesis. But if you're a bit over enthusiastic and confident on your work, and you're ready to do 1 mile ahead, you are ready to walk 1 mile ahead, then maximally you can restrict yourself for 4 objectives, and not in any case more than 4 objectives, because this can dilute your work, or this can also lead into the lengthening of your entire thesis, and ultimately can also create frustration. So always make sure you confine your objectives for only 3 objectives. Then coming on to the review of literature, performing a very clear review of literature, at least from the last 10 years, becomes very, very crucial, because this will give you the basis for your research. Now, in our previous video, we have also created a special content on how do I do a perfect review of literature. I would like you people to go and look into it. The link has been actually given in the description. Then, once I compile the review of literature, it is always better to use the help of technology. So I would always recommend you to add your references and create a library, especially in softwares such as EndNote or Mendeley, which can actually help you in writing your manuscripts. Another important tool is Zotero, which is again a free tool. So I would recommend you for understanding or for creating library, which can help in saving a lot of time when you're writing your theses and also when you're writing your research manuscripts. Then once you have the primary data which has been ready, then just make sure you validate your methodology which can address your question. And this could be done by various methods of having proper measurements, having a proper data collection, and very importantly, if you are using any kinds of animals or humans in your studies, have a clear ethical proposal so that the ethical committee clears your objectives and provides the necessary help which is required to prove your particular statement of question. Then also know what is the funding which is actually required. So many times when we are over enthusiastic, we go for such a work that the funding becomes very, very crucial. So if any point of time, if funding becomes an issue, then the entire story has been ruined. So I would urge onto you people to understand the entire budgeting of your proposal, and that is how you need to talk about your project to your mentor. And also understand who are the other collaborators, who are the other people who are actually getting associated with you, because not everything can be done on your own. Say for example, I purify a particular molecule, and then for performing some analytical studies or spectral studies like NMR or so, if I do not have a facility, I should know which are the central facilities which will provide me aid so that I can actually prove my concept. So all this I need to know, and also approach people to have a better idea of how exactly I can get my data compiled. Now, once I have done everything, just make sure you develop an analysis plan. And once you have started developing an analysis plan, compile all your data, perform your results, and compile all your data. And one big mistake all PhD students they do is, they keep on working for the entire tenure of their PhD, and only the data which comes at the end they start compiling at around third year or fourth year. Now this is a very big mistake. I urge you people not to do this mistake. It is always better if you can even write one small paragraph in a day, or at least one paragraph for 2 days. This will actually help you in actually creating a big picture, because this creates a framework for your thesis. So once you do all these things, then you start writing, especially writing introduction methods and methodologies, and also creating dummy tables wherein how do I represent my data, because not everything would be final at first stage. So creating that dummy tables will also help you in compiling the data part. Then very importantly, you have the analysis and the writing component. And finally, when you are done with your analysis, especially statistics, then here emerges the publication part or the mini thesis. And upon this, you can still build your mega thesis. So, it is always important that you follow all these steps for your effective thesis writing. Now, coming on to the framework of the design, it always includes the planning and defining things. Then this can again get extrapolated into the theoretical framework. Then you actually come up with the research subject and the selection method. And then you will see what are the analytical methods you can actually perform to study your objectives. Then you start with data collection and analysis. And there is a series of pipeline which you need to follow up, and that ends with your data analysis and biostatistics. And finally, with this data, you can go for publication. Remember, always try to publish it, your papers in good pre-reviewed journal. And we have also have created an exclusive content for you people on how to write manuscripts, especially for good publishers. So just make sure you also refer those particular videos. Now, once you are done with this, finally, you have your paper. And now your paper, like first paper should represent your first objective. Second paper should represent your second objective. So, knowingly or unknowingly, you are actually creating your PhD thesis. So this also makes a very huge difference at the end when you are actually writing your thesis. Now, many times I also tell all our viewers to actually follow a simple formula that is called as IMRAD. IMRAD refers to IMRAD, and I refers to introduction, M refers to methodology, and R refers to results and discussion. So if you are able to follow this particular pipeline of having a review of literature, then understanding your review, research question, designing your objectives, then, setting up proper methodologies to define your objectives, then with that you have appropriate results, and then finally you are trying to discuss on the topic or on the data what you have compiled, and that is how which makes a very good manuscript or a thesis. Now, as and when you normally, write your thesis, do not give an entire fully bound thesis for correction onto your supervisor, because, looking into the volume, okay, the supervisor might get, disturbed, and many a times there are few ideas which are always, beneficial because of the experience of your supervisor. This will always help you. So whenever you are trying to start writing your thesis, maybe your first objective or your second objective or the introduction component, it is always better to have a framework from your side, and please go and talk to your supervisor. Now, talking to your supervisor, having an effective communication with the supervisor is half battle won. Okay, so the supervisor will also feel that you're actually putting up, you're considering his ideas or her ideas, so that this can create an effective thesis which is of a greater narration. Then I always recommend for graphical abstracts, because most of the publishers now from the textual abstracts, now they have moved on to graphical abstracts, and again creating a good graphical abstract also can increase the quantum of readers, and also it will increase the citation index of the researcher and the laboratory. So having a graphical abstract always will help. Then, as we have already discussed with the proper literature survey, so if you are able to do a very good literature survey, this will be a very good aid for your introduction part, defining the rationale of your study, and very importantly, the moment you get the results, how do I actually compile, how do I agree or disagree with the findings which are already available on my particular topic, or what is that new thing which I have bought in through my research. This could be always refuted or argued in a much intellectual way with a effective review of literature or literature survey. Now, another important thing what our PhD students, they normally ignore or give very less importance is the quality of pictures whatever they document. Please remember, if you are trying to do something on microbiology, so just make sure that if you are trying to define the mode of action of a phytomolecule onto a bacterial system, so having good images, especially TEM images or SEM images, or confocal microscopic images, or atomic absorption microscopic images, okay, atomic force microscopic images, or spectral images, okay, this would be of great help, because a picture speaks 1,000 words. So just make sure you always focus on good quality pictures, and it is always easy for publication also. Once you have done all these things, now the very important thing is data formulation. We are not been trained in our masters, especially for data formulation, because I've been trained for performing various kinds of experiments. All this is fine, but when it comes for the data formulation, once I get huge amount of data, and especially when I make a master chart, I'm actually confused that what exactly has to be done with this particular data. And many a times our condition would be, should I go with this particular software like SPSS for analysis, or should I go on to Prism GraphPad, and you are into a fix. So it is always necessary your seniors of the particular lab or your supervisor would be helpful for you in this particular regard. So just make sure when you are writing an effective thesis, your presentation and discussion also comes handy. And for this, what I would suggest is, every week, if possible, every week or once in 15 days, just make sure that one Saturday you dedicate yourself for a presentation in a small group, so that you can always design your graphs and have a discussion with your lab mates. So this will actually create a much huge content for your thesis, especially in terms of your results and discussion component. So normally what people they do is, when they start, they think that I just Aarambh se sit on the front of a computer and I just keep on typing. Please remember, you cannot do this. So I would normally suggest all our PhD students to start writing in a book, because when you start narrating your story onto your book, this can actually build up a huge data, and very importantly, it would protect you from not getting distracted. Because when you're writing your thesis onto your computer directly, there are huge chances that you do out of frustration, you do a copy paste work, and then this can also lead into plagiarism. So please remember, it is always nicer to pen down your ideas onto a book rather than directly typing it onto your computer. Once I have the entire data, okay, once I have the entire master table, this is my story. So I have so much of work done from last 3 years or 4 years, and now the quantum of data is actually sinking me down, okay, and this can lead into a lot of frustration. So it is only your supervisor who can actually help in cleaning up your data and know what is known and what is unknown. And it is not necessary, please remember, mark my words, it is not necessary that you need to put up all the experiments, whatever was done, into a thesis. It is also okay to put certain data into supplementary component, which can actually minimize the quantum or the volume of the data. Especially rather than writing 300-400 pages, it is always recommended that you write your thesis between 100 to 150 pages. This is actually sufficient if you are able to publish in 3 to 4 good journals. Now, how do I do data processing? Data analysis normally takes 5 different steps. So first thing is define your data. Then once you define your data, measure your data very thoroughly. And then once you measure your data, analyze the data. And once you analyze the data, improve your data in terms of discussion. Especially try to compare your test with the controls. Try to compare with your test with the naive. Try to compare your test with your vehicle treated. And also try to test your drug with that of your available standards. So this will actually improve the data quality. And finally, you plot it into beautiful graphs, and not necessary every time it should be a bar graph. You have various types and figures of representation. Maybe we will also try to create a content on how to create effective graphs sometime later. Once you do this for analysis, you have various kinds of tools. Example, in most of the data, when I look into a PhD student, Excel is the most popular used tool. Though Excel gives you good amount of data, but on the way, I would always recommend you people for going into certain other tools such as IBM SPS Modeler. Then you have Python, which can create very nice box plots. You have the Prism graph pad, and very importantly, you have the SAS software. And then R programming is of a greater help if you are actually talking upon big data analysis such as microbiome data or gene expression data. So with all this, we come to an end of the final writing of the thesis. Once with all these steps, if you are able to write an effective thesis, then here comes the happiness, the entire endorphins of both the supervisor and the researcher comes to an end by the completion of the thesis. And this is how, once you complete the thesis, the greater happiness comes over there. And I urge you people to follow these particular steps for easy writing of your PhD thesis. All the very best from Biotecnika. Thank you very much.